There we go. Okay, so apologies for not starting that right away. But let's continue rolling right along. So looking at our selection dashboard, so we've got a bunch of results that came up at the World Challenge event in Czech. So we've made some updates. So I'm actually going to go into that dashboard just quickly to remind everyone how it works. So when we look at, let's look at carding. Got stuff in the way here. There we go. So looking at our carding, reminder, of course, that the details of what's on here you guys can look at yourselves, but it's the format of the document that's super important. So we've got our different levels of carding in the columns across priorities 1 through 9. And then we are highlighting the names of athletes in our rows. These are athletes who have achieved some level of carding. Okay, and what we've done, and you can see with our few athletes who've been out competing so far. So Marie has achieved her priority 5 criteria as a U23 athlete. The same result actually also gets her to achieve a priority 6, which of course is a lower priority, so higher priority takes precedent. But she has attained a carding eligible criteria, so it's highlighted in green, and you can go in and click on the link in order to actually see what the result was and find some evidence of that. And then I looked down, I got Josh Ofori, his first place at the World Challenge counts as a priority 6. But it doesn't count as a priority 5, even though he's a U23 athlete, because the nitty-gritty details of that say that it has to be an Olympic weight class for a priority 5 result to count. And then we also had, who else? Let's go through all of them actually here. So Nickinson, he, with his second place at the World Challenge, got a priority 5 criteria. So great job, Nickinson. It doesn't count as a priority 6 because he needed to be a U23 athlete. But we're trying to be as verbose with our explanations about these as possible, just so that it's quite clear where people have qualified and where they haven't, and why they haven't. And then just for the sake of making sure we see everyone going down, so we've got Mackenzie, who's also qualified, Kioma has qualified, Kuar has qualified, and Scarlett Delgado has qualified. So and Victoria Penny has silver medal, but unfortunately she didn't meet some of those secondary criteria, because even though she got the silver medal, you need to have at least one win in order for that result to count forward. So that's why we note that we know that she got the result, but we've highlighted it in red saying that at this point, that result not good enough in order to get carding. But that's fingers crossed for everyone, that at the World Cup in Kazakhstan, Victoria is able to get a win and be on the podium at the same time. That would be fantastic. So that's where we're at so far with the results. And of course, as we go through the World Cup and we go through the World Championships, we will continue updating this. And we certainly encourage athletes to be checking in on this document anytime they think that they've got a result that should qualify, or certainly their coaches, parents, fans, whoever. It's a publicly available document. We encourage everyone to take a look, to help us make sure that we've got everything up to date. Okay, so I'm gonna hop back in here for our national athlete list. So the national athlete list is published as an annual, but we do have some updates that will be coming to it because we have now had our U19 national championships and our U23 national championships, and that will bump some athletes up. We haven't updated the actual list document, but on the dashboard with categorizations, we have updated that information. Wow, it would have been timely if I just stayed there when that. Okay, let me go back. Athlete categorization. So we're seeing the same thing. So as we've had results come in, that have updated how athletes are qualified. So, for instance, Marie and Nickinson, I can see those right away. So, those are now World Challenge in Czech events that have got them their podium potential status. So we've made those updates, and we've also got all of the updates for the U23 and U19s, I think, at Quebec. Yeah, so I'm seeing U19s and U23s down. So we've got a whole lot of athletes who are sort of tied at levels of identification. And we've made two sort of structural updates to this. So we've made sure that it's clear what the categorization date is. We were ranking people within their category. I've gotten rid of that because it didn't actually mean all that much. But what we have done is we've gone and done a calculation on what the expiry date is of their most recent qualifying result. And it's giving us a number of days showing until that result actually expires. So that is giving us sort of a heads up for anyone who it looks as dropping off of the identified athlete list. So we'll be able to get in contact with them, one, to make sure that we haven't screwed up, and two, to just let them know that their level of interaction with the national team could be changing at some point when their status changes. So we've got a few athletes who are sort of at less than 90 days here. So we've got a 44, 44, but most people have sort of re-upped themselves pretty significantly, and a handful are sort of at sort of just over 200 days, but they've got until sort of elite nationals to sort of re-up their qualification. Okay, heading back in. So I've highlighted some changes here. So karting updates, we did. Athlete categorizations, we did. Any questions on anything around the selection dashboard? I'm hearing and seeing none, so I'm going to move on. So looking at our national team plan. So just two minor updates to talk about. So we've now got selections and flights booked for our U19 team going to Brandenburg. So Coach Brad Ross, Coach Jesse, Coach Ariane Fontaine, and Coach Yuli will be on that tour with us. We're very excited to be going. Brandenburg is a fantastic event, and it's really got a developmental focus. It also sounds like there will be some pretty good quality competition there, given that we don't have a U19 World Championships. So we know the Americans are going to be there, the French are going to be there, certainly the Germans will be there, and we know there will be other international teams there as well. It's going to be a fantastic opportunity to get lots of bouts in books. The big change here is in the U23 camp. So we took a really strong look at our schedule and the schedule of different provinces. And we have moved this U23 camp back and shortened it a little bit. Because we wanted to make sure that we weren't in conflict with two of our biggest competitions of the year, one of them being the Ontario Provincial Championships. We don't want to be cutting off, virtually a third of our members in their opportunity to be able to come in and participate in the camp. So we've moved that back a little bit. We are also dealing with proximity to our elite nationals that we were mindful of, and of course we've got the Thanksgiving holiday in the mix in this time of year as well. So we did a little bit of moving back and forth around that. The details of that camp are in the NTP and a full document, and we'll continue updating that over the next couple of weeks as we sort of lock down exactly what it is that we're attempting to do there. The purpose of that camp is all about assessing our U23 athletes, and that extends well down into youth. And we want to make sure that those athletes are well set up for the 2026 year, and making sure that they've got some understanding of where they are within the program. And we're hoping to really have a great, as we did last year, a great opportunity with lots of sparring, lots of people from across the country coming in and learning from each other. There will be direct invites going out for that camp. Plus, we will be asking, as we did last year, each of the provinces to say if you've got someone who you feel would be at the right level to go and could benefit from participating, with a combined sparring camp, then certainly we want that input from each of the provinces. I will say, in particular, we are looking and trying to pay more attention this year to sort of our fringe weight categories. So I'm looking at the heavier side of the women's, the lighter side of the women's, and if we have athletes who are having a super hard time finding sparring, finding bouts, this may be an opportunity to go and see if we can get some of that interaction that they haven't been able to get at home in the provinces. So you'll see some notifications coming out to each of the provinces and the personal coaches more about that and and what we are trying to achieve with trying to pull in specifically women's 48s, women's 51s, women's 75s, women's 80s. Because we are in a situation now where we are selecting athletes to be able to go to the World Youth Championships and to World Cups who, have got fewer than 20 bouts in their book. And, we would really like to have more opportunities for these athletes to spar, to gain experience, and to be ready for the rigors of international competition. And, if attendance at a national sparring camp is what's can help make that happen, we want to find ways to do it. So just to let everyone know, a little heads up for future planning. Any questions on updates to the national team plan? Like I said, we'll talk a little bit about the 2026 draft later on in the presentation. It's my chai latte cue. Okay, moving on. A quick congratulations to all of our athletes who are at the World Challenge in Czech. So this was the first real official World Challenge that Canada had been to. It was the only one scheduled for this year. It was quite a decent tournament from everything that we saw and all the feedback that we got out of the coaches on level of performance internationally. And I want to, this is the best part of my job right here, calling out medals at international competitions. So, of course, we had the gold from Josh out of Alberta in the Marshall Boxing Club. Nickinson out of Quebec with the corner. He had a silver medal. Silver medal out of Marie, also from the corner. Silver medal for Victoria Penny out of Sully's in Ontario. And a bronze medal for Mackenzie, who's fighting out of Fight Night Boxing Club and representing Ontario. So congratulations to each of those athletes. We're really happy with the level of performance. And of course, we've got most of those athletes, not quite all, rolling into the competition at the World Cup. And here's sort of what our roster is looking like for that World Cup. So the team has been in Kazakhstan for almost 2.5 weeks, and have been training at what seems to be quite an intense training camp. Probably looking forward to this week where everyone's tapering a little. We did have three athletes not continue on to Kazakhstan. So Randy Pollins pulled out of the camp nursing an injury, so he's back home recovering and getting himself ready for his next opportunities. We also had Mackenzie Wright and Scarlett Delgado both sort of declined their opportunity to go to Kazakhstan. They have a YTP that is primarily focused on the World Championships, and they're making sure that they have a solid training block at home before they get into the centralized training environment in Montreal for most of August in order to prepare for the World Championships happening in September. I'll also highlight that we had two athletes added to the roster. So we had Caitlin Clark in women's 70 representing Ontario out of Destiny Boxing, and Alyssa Mansueto in women's 60 out of Quebec, representing Ring 83. So both those athletes came in sort of just for the Kazakhstan camp, and will be continuing on through until the end of the World Cup, and then coming home with the team at that point. So any questions about Kazakhstan at this point? Okay, moving on to World Championships. So we have got results that we can use for some of our selections. So that's why I bring it up. So a reminder that our goal for this year is to come out of the World Championships with 2 top 8 performances. Certainly medals would be lovely, but we're not going to be greedy. Top eights is sort of the published goal. And looking at that selection criteria. So it's a 4-tier system. So we will first prioritize taking athletes who have had a top 3 finish at a previous World Cup. And of course, when we originally wrote the criteria, we were attending 2 different World Cups. We had one of those World Cups get canceled on us, and then there was a replacement World Cup that got put in the place of the canceled event. But by that time, we only had a month and a half of preparation time, and we decided not to go. So really, it's just this party is really just based off of Kazakhstan. So if we get anyone who medals in Kazakhstan will have a top selection opportunity for World Championships. Then, if we still have weight categories that are unfilled, we go down to, did an athlete have a top 3 in a World Challenge in Czech? And we have had a number of athletes who have met that priority, and we've listed them down below. Then we look at priority 3 selection criteria. So we're looking at a performance evaluation of all the athletes who attended the Czech World Challenge and World Cup 3. And once World Cup 3 is completed, we'll take a look at everyone who competed, take a look at their quality of performance. Who are they up against? Do we see something that looks like they may be within an arm's reach of being able to achieve a top 8? We can make selections based on that priority 3 criteria. And then we do have a priority 4 criteria. And that priority 4 is because HPD judgment based on an opportunity to achieve the stated competition goals. But for whatever reason, an athlete wasn't picked up in either priority 1, priority 2, or priority 3. And I'm explicit about this because I want everyone to be absolutely clear why this exists. This would be a criteria where we could select an athlete like Wyatt, who continues to be a current member of the national team, or Tamara, but who haven't met and aren't in a position to meet either priority 1, priority 2, or priority 3. But we could not select Wyatt or Tam over top of an athlete who had already achieved a priority 1, a priority 2, or a priority 3 criteria. Okay, so the criteria exists for us to be able to do that with a priority 4, but it really is sort of a last chance. We haven't filled a spot. Do we think that there's a realistic chance for a top 8 or with an athlete, and we could pick them up there? Another reason why we might execute on a priority 4 could be that an athlete was injured partway through the season and wasn't able to attend the World Cup or the World Challenge in order to get eligible for priority 1, 2, or 3 criteria. So just to be clear, looking at the athletes who have qualified so far, so we've got 4 who are officially named to the team already. So of course, Mackenzie, Marie, Josh, and Nickinson. I will point out that the priority 2 criteria does say a top 3 in World Challenge. There is, of course, the proviso in the small print that you need to have won a fight in getting to your top 3 or your top three at a World Cup or anything else. And that's unfortunately why we haven't automatically selected Victoria Penny as a priority two, but she remains eligible to either get a priority one through medaling at the World Cup or a priority three or potentially a priority four. So just make sure everything is absolutely clear. Any questions about selections for World Championships? Okay, I'm going to return to my chai latte quickly. And moving on. So the next event that we have on our schedule is the Melee Gala in Winnipeg. So I've just reiterated what the goals are. These are all explained in the NTP. But we've got a similar selection criteria. So we're looking at evaluation of performance at World Cup 3, evaluation performance at the World Challenges, and then evaluation at the Quebec Open in the elite and U23 categories. And then we've got an opportunity for judgment of the HPD based on the opportunity to achieve the stated goals. Of course, the goals being up there. Our selections so far we are waiting on naming anyone on the women's side, but we are pretty confident that we've got our men named. It is important to understand that we can only send people for whom we have an opponent, and it is the Americans who dictate which weight categories are being contested at the event. So we have selected Karan Sembi out of Ontario. He represents King of the Ring. Apologies to everyone, I haven't written that down here. In the men's 60, Ayan Kokor. He represents Ontario, and he is out of the Bramalea Boxing Club. In the men's 65, we've got Mohamed Malad out of Nova Scotia, and he is representing tribal boxing. And in the men's 80, Umar Karkamo, also representing King of the Ring and out of Ontario. The two coaches who we have selected to lead the team at that event, because of course the national team, full-time national team coaches will just be coming home at this point from the World Championships, and it'll have been a long season for them, and we're happy to have them take a little break. So we are very lucky to have Coach Dylan Martin, who works out as the head coach and I think general manager, I'm not sure, at the Pan Am Boxing Club. And coach intern Ulyssia Agudelo. Apologies, coach, for butchering your name. But both those coaches will be leading the team out there in Winnipeg. We will also have an opportunity for personal coaches of those athletes to be able to go and act as a third coach in the corner. So that information will be passed on to those athletes and their clubs and their coaches so that they can start making arrangements if they are interested in taking up on that opportunity. For those personal coaches, we do not, unfortunately, have resources to be able to help out with getting them there. But we would certainly love to have them if they are available to be able to come in. And given that we've got two from King of the Ring, that would be lovely. And if we've got some support from Ontario to be able to facilitate that, that'd be great. And same thing out of Nova Scotia. It'd be wonderful if we could have one of the coaches from Tribal out there helping out Mohammed while competing. Any questions on Melee Gala? I can't believe I didn't say it. I just thanks to the United Boxing Club for their support of this event and continuing to put resources into having Canadian national team come in and compete against the US national team. It is really a fantastic event, and having the opportunity for Canadian athletes to get an international quality bout at home on Canadian soil, especially when we're so well funded by the Melee Gala organization, is really special. So again, thanks to that club. Okay, quick update on how we're doing with training logs for identified athletes. The answer is not well. I'm super disappointed, in fact. And you'll see it in a second. Just a reminder that the training log is available for athletes to be able to log in and give us some insight into what they're doing. It's available in both English and French. It's a very simple tool, like extremely simple tool, and it does some very rudimentary graphing. But there are two primary goals that we have for this. The first is we want to be able to see what our nationally identified athletes are doing, in order to help provide some feedback to them and their coaches around, are they, doing appropriate things? Are we seeing improvement in their performance, in their physical and their technical and their tactical and their mental capacities throughout the year? The other reason is we are really interested in answering this question: how much training does a nationally identified boxer in Canada need to do? And everyone's who coaches seems to be able to tell me what their particular athlete needs to do, but no one seems to have any, really well vetted information about what is happening sort of nationwide and what the aggregate athlete looks like as opposed to an individual athlete. So we're hoping to be able to provide some insight into that. And this is where I feel like we're falling down a little bit, is looking at this past week. I've got a handful of athletes who are giving in pretty high quality data and certainly putting in all of their trainings. And we've got a number of athletes who have either just stopped sending things in, or they're well behind in putting in their data. Now, I will say there are a number of athletes on this list who are currently training with the national team right now in Kazakhstan. I I don't expect them to be prioritizing filling in a Google sheet after every training session. They've got other things to worry about. So I'm not particularly worried about them, but it would be really nice to be able to see, this data in a more fulsome way. We've toyed with sending direct reminders out automatically to athletes, but there's a level of nerdery there that my geek cred maybe isn't quite up to. Um, but we are going to have to take a look at doing that, because I'm starting to get a feeling that despite the fact that we have a philosophy of trying to extend the net as wide as we possibly can with these nationally identified athletes, if the nationally identified athletes are not able to do what I would consider a pretty minimal level of providing data back to us, then I'm not sure that we're interested in continuing to put resources into putting on monthly meetings and trying to go and do aggregated data on athletes. So I'm disappointed by this, but we will continue working the project. Okay. Oh, the other thing I want to say is any of the athletes who are carded, and some of these athletes on this list are carded, they have a separate system that they're using to be able to put in their data. And we are quite confident that those carded athletes are filling in the system regularly. So no worries when it comes to carded athletes. Okay, moving on, just a quick reminder that for any clubs who are interested, we do have the strength training program available. We're up to 12 clubs now who are taking advantage of this. It is essentially you get insight into exactly what the strength training program is for our national team. And we encourage you to use that information in any way you possibly can. And that could be direct providing of that program out to your high performance program within your club or your province, or it could be that you are taking that as a framework and then making some slight modifications to it and providing it out to your U17 program, your U13 program, your youth program, your master's program, your box fit program. It certainly gives you a starting point and sort of can act as a cheat sheet for being able to write out sort of a weekly strength training program. So we encourage people to take a look if they're interested. We're pretty proud of the system and the quality of the training that is suggested in it. It is well vetted, and like I said, it is being used by our centralized national team athletes. So, and it's available up on the Boxing Canada website through our store. Okay, and moving on to our NTP 2026. So we are in initial draft for this document. So there is a whole lot of stuff that, of course, needs to be updated. I am targeting sort of the end of summer to have this as an official, ready to execute document, which will give us, fingers crossed, say like 3-4 months of lead time before we actually start executing on anything that's actually detailed in the plan. But the more eyes that we have on it, the better. And we are starting into two sort of structural changes that I haven't really written down on here yet before I get into the technical changes. So the two structural changes are we are going to start moving as much of the annual business of the high performance program into this document as we possibly can. And so we have just put in some formalization around both our athlete advisory group and our high performance advisory group. So we are going to detail who the current members of those two groups are in the NTP, and we have put out formal, well, I guess it's not formal yet because it's still in draft, but we are going to have sort of a formal reminder in that document when it gets published at the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, that we will have an opportunity for nominations to those two groups, to those two advisory groups. And we will be executing on those nominations at the 2025 National Championships in Winnipeg. So at that point, we will know who the current athlete advisory group will be, and we will know who the current high performance advisory group will be. So there will be a formal process for nomination. It will not be a rigorous or hurdle filled process. It will be more like, hey, I'd really like my name to be considered, or it'll be, hey, I really want this person's name to be considered. And you just need to email that to the national team, and we'll put that into consideration, and we'll make those decisions and announce them at nationals. What I will say about major changes, so we are incorporating our categorization document. So is an athlete world class? Are they podium potential? Are they emerging? Are they national squad? So we've incorporated that in. So we are moving away from having a separate categorization document. We just feel that having fewer documents, but having more information sort of quickly at hand is probably a better strategy. We continue updating information on Commonwealth Games. I was really hoping to have insight into what the weight categories will be at this point, but it sounds like after a phone call with the Commonwealth Sport Canada that they are anticipating we'll find out midway through July. We do know that there will be 6 men's weight categories, and we do know that there will be 4 women's categories. We also know that Commonwealth Sport Canada will only permit 6 athletes on the boxing team for the event. And that's despite the fact that there are 10 total weight classes available. This is one of the things that is unique about Commonwealth Games, is that it is not necessarily a fully open selection tournament. There are these interesting limitations. We don't feel that this isn't necessarily a problem. And the Commonwealth Games has historically had a record of not always having Olympic weight classes, or not all of the Olympic weight classes. So it could be that we will have some either I'll put it right out, some women's 48s, which would be amazing because women's 48 isn't a current Olympic weight class. We could also have some heavier weight women weight class in there. Instead of going to 75, they may go to 80, which would also be really interesting for us. So we will update when we have information on that, but at this point we don't. But just a heads up. And actually related to that, and I need to say this every time I have an opportunity, the selection process, we've actually detailed where we're at in sort of our draft selection process in the current 2026 draft NTP. But the highlights of that process for Commonwealth Games are that we are going to select based off of World Cup results right up until the last minute when we have to name our team, which I believe is early June in 2026. So results of World Cups from basically now all the way up until June 2026, those will be considered priority one. Then we'll probably look at high quality results at World Challenges. We've had one World Challenge now, and then we will look at World Challenges, and we anticipate we'll have probably two World Challenges before the deadline for registration for Commonwealth Games in 2026. But if we still have weight classes unfilled at the registration deadline based off of those two high quality international selection pathways, we will do our selection based off of the results of Canadian nationals in 2025 in Winnipeg. So that's elite nationals 2025 in November in Winnipeg. So if you are an athlete or a coach of an athlete who is interested in going to the Commonwealth Games, you need, unless you're super confident that you're going to qualify at a World Cup, you need to be at Canadian nationals. Because if we have to go to a domestic selection, we are not going to hold a one-off event just to select a handful of spots. We will go back to our national championships, which, I mean, frankly, everyone should be at anyway. So we will go back to those results if needed. So I just want to underline, if you're interested in going to the Commonwealth Games at all, the best way to get on that pathway is to win your category at Canadian Nationals. Reminder that we've got U19 World Championships next year, and we've got a draft date for that. It'll be in August, so end of summer. We don't know where, and we don't know exact dates, but we do know that it's happening. And we have Youth Olympic Games. Youth Olympic Games is happening at the end of October, beginning of November in 2026. However, it looks like World Boxing is going to hold some sort of international qualifier for that event, and they have sort of trickled out information or leaked information saying that that qualification event will have to happen sometime in either February or March 2026. Needless to say, this is not ideal for us because normally we would love to do the selection for that event just at our U17 or U19 national championships, but those are currently scheduled for March. And depending on how that world qualifier works, we will very likely, if the draft dates are correct, it will be before our national championship. So we don't have a really great pathway there. So we are currently toying with this idea of doing a selection camp of some sort in January in Montreal, which will be combined with our national team January camp, which is already detailed in the NTP 2026 and was announced back in 2025 NTP that it would be happening. So we're looking at that right now. There are a number of very tight constraints around who can actually go to the Youth Olympic Games. Like you have to be 17 years old as of November 14th, but you could turn 18 the next day. Like it's a very odd thing. And of course, because that doesn't align quite naturally with our normal weight category or our age categories, we just sort of don't know what's going on there. We also don't know what the weight categories are at this point, so we're sort of in a weird spot there. So, but I want to give that heads up. The philosophies around selection, we've sort of detailed them as we did in the last NTP, and we'll continue doing that. And I just want to highlight for everyone those key dates. So there will be a January national team camp in Montreal. There will be a September 2026 U23 assessment camp. That's the same camp that I was talking about earlier that has been moved sort of back in our schedule for this year. So it's that end of October, beginning of November camp in 2025, but we're going to try really hard to get it back into a September timeframe in 2026. And like I said, I encourage everyone to use the links, go and take a look at that draft NTP, because it is a pretty important document, and the more eyes we have on it, the better. Okay, looking at upcoming dates, just so everyone knows. Oh, and look at that, I've got World Cup 3 listed as World Cup 2. My apologies. So we've got Kazakhstan. So the draw is actually happening on Sunday. So as soon as we can on Sunday, because we'll get that information Sunday morning, we will do an updated post on our website because fights will begin on Monday. So we want Canadians to have an opportunity to be able to log in and watch online because it's going to be broadcast on the World Boxing YouTube page. But as soon as we've got some sort of schedule information, we'll post that up right away. So look for that Sunday afternoon, hopefully at lunch. Then of course our Brandenburg tour in late July and through into early August. And then we've got the Elite World Championship, September 4th through 14th. Our national team will be doing a training camp in Montreal through most of August, and then they've also going over to Scotland in order to do a training camp over with a number of international teams right before the event. Melee Gala at the end of September, of course, we talked about already. Our U23 assessment camp, and look at that, I've got the wrong dates there. I wonder if I've still got, oh, look at that, it's still in my copy paste. So right there, look at that, updates as we go. Elite Nationals, 25th through 30th in Winnipeg. I anticipate that we'll have details from the organizing committee with a full handbook and selection, or sorry, registration information, probably in the next week and a half. I've seen sort of final drafts and it all looks quite strong, so we should be ready to go with that. And then National Team Camp, January 2026. So Elites, U19s, and by invitation. And what I should add in there is that we will probably also have something around Youth Olympic Games in there as well. And then we do have information already from World Boxing that they are targeting right now. I don't know whether they'll be able to execute on it, but they're targeting World Cup every other month and a World Challenge in those missed out months. So starting in February, we'll have World Cup 1, and then in March, we'll have World Challenge 1, and then in February, March, April, we'll have World Cup number 2, and then May, we'll have World Challenge number 2, and it'll sort of continue like that with 4 World Cups and 4 World Challenges. They're pretty sure they've got locations and dates for each of the World Cups. They're not so sure at this point around the World Challenges, but we anticipate that we'll find out sort of by the end of the summer about what all those exact dates and locations will be. And then just a reminder, of course, we've got U17, U19, U23 nationals. So that is scheduled. That will be in Calgary in late March 2026. That's our sort of tied into the Canada Cup event. So very similar to the first year we did Canada Cup in 2023, and sorry, 2024. And then Commonwealth Games, sort of in midsummer, and the Youth Olympic Games into the fall. So sort of where we're at with our schedules. So some updates on other areas around the organization. So we've got a strategic plan renewal that's going on within Boxing Canada. We attempted to send out emails to each of our members. We have about 10,000 members. In fact, as of 2020, our 2024 official numbers are 10,005, and we are on track to best that this year by about 300. So thank you everyone for doing your part, because it is, I mean, looking at who's online right now, it's each of you are in a club that is contributing to that. So thank you very much. But out of those 10,000 names, we probably only had about 5,000 actual emails or anything written in the sort of that they've got an email address attached to that membership. And out of those, we had probably 1,000 bounces for either incorrect email addresses or out of date email addresses or mailbox fulls or whatever else came up. So if you have not received an opportunity to fill out that the strategic plan survey, I would encourage you to send me an email, and I can get you a copy of that. We are not going to publish a direct link on our website to that document because we don't want an opportunity for someone to, tip the scales on the data by just going in and hammering through and repeatedly putting in stuff. So certainly if they're a non-member. So if you haven't received an opportunity to go in and have your say on sort of the information about strategic planning that will help us set a chart a course forward for the next 8 years, I would really encourage you to get in touch, and we'll make sure that you get a link to that. At this point, I didn't take a look this morning, but the survey's been out for about 3 weeks, and we've only received like 150 in total, and that's pretty weak. So we would really like to get a few more. Invitations for this meeting. So before I hit the record button earlier, we were testing out doing direct invitations to people on sort of certain direct email lists. It sounds like we didn't bugger that up by accidentally showing everyone's email. So we're going to continue doing that. And in fact, this afternoon, right after I eat some lunch, I will go in and send out the invitations for the next meeting, which of course will be the fourth Thursday and Friday of next month. And for anyone else, so I know Rebecca's on here. Rebecca, thank you for going and doing an Instagram call out around this meeting. We encourage everyone to do that. This is an open meeting. There are no restrictions on who can attend. We are happy to have as many people involved as possible. Related to that, of course, the recording of this meeting will go up on our YouTube channel. You can find links to that online. Electronic boxing books. So we have now had meetings with 3 different organizations who are pushing a solution to the paper monstrosity that we are currently dealing with. And I'm really interested in getting some feedback from people on this call about whether they are interested in having that happen, and any concerns that they might have around moving to an electronic version of the actual book. We do obviously know that there could be issues around if you're going to the States and if we're competing somewhere that doesn't have internet or something. And there are solutions within each of these three platforms that we've seen that get around that problem. But the opportunity presented by having an electronic book is significant, and it facilitates distribution of books, first of all, because it's a lot easier to just straight email it out to people as opposed to getting a physical book that right now has to go from the national office to a provincial office and then a provincial office out to the individual. It also provides an opportunity for us to be able to collect really, really good, meaningful data on competition and how those competitions are going. So we're really interested in that because right now we only have one province who is sending us the information that they are supposed to around their sanctioned competitions, right? So BC is sending us a full rundown of, here's a competition that happened, here's the results, here's everyone who participated, here's a list of any injuries if we had any. And that information is super valuable. And at one point, many years ago, that was flowing regularly up to the national office, but it hasn't certainly in the time I've been here, and probably a number of years before that. And this is the type of information that we need in order to make wise decisions around programming and insurance and a lot of other things. So having electronic books would solve a lot of that. So I'm really encouraged everyone to send me your thoughts if you have any. And then note on membership renewal. So we have moved all of our membership tracking into a new online platform. It's the same platform that Boxing Ontario had been using for a few years. It's called Tracky. It's the same platform we were using for registrations for national level events. Everyone's data for 2025 is now in there, although, as I said, it's a little weak when it comes to things like emails being passed on from the provinces. But we've got that information. Provinces will be able to use that online system to send out membership renewal notices, which is for many provinces probably going to be a new thing. And we encourage the provinces to do that. And of course, a reminder that our new membership year starts for 2026 in September 2025, right? Because our membership, a 2026 membership, actually becomes active if you don't already have a 2025 membership. A 2026 membership becomes active September 1st, so that we can have sort of continuity around that. And if we can get the majority of our members sort of trained up on this idea of renewing right away and getting that done, it can really help with provincial cash flows, right? Because provinces can get, maybe we're hoping, sort of up to 80% of their membership revenue sort of before 2026 actually begins. And then they can have sort of some security around planning how they're going to use that membership revenue. Certainly that helps the national office as well, because we get a piece of the majority of those memberships. Our cash flow situation is a little different simply because we do get Sport Canada money, so it's a little more even. But by far, the biggest source of revenue for either the provinces or for the national office is membership. So we're really excited about having this opportunity to be able to go and direct renew people, and you should be able to renew directly online. No more paper, no more having to send things in, just do it online, pay by credit card, and be able to move on from there. So, okay, and last slide, just a reminder about our next meeting. So will be scheduled for July 24th and July 25th. Same thing, an evening option and an afternoon, or if you're on the West Coast, morning option. And of course, we've got links to our previous HP updates. All of them are available there, and links out to any of the Boxing Canada committee advisory or update meetings elsewhere in the organization. So if anyone's interested in checking those out, you have the opportunity to. Okay, That's wrapping up at exactly 1 hour. Any questions? Oh, and actually, now that I think of it, because I'm looking and I see we've got an official on the call. One of the other things that we're going to be changing structurally to our national team program is that we are going to be putting in selection criteria for international officiating opportunities. And we are building that into the NTP 2026. We haven't actually made that structural change yet, but it will be coming. So we will have selection criteria strictly for athletes, and then there will be selection criteria also for officials at the same time. And that way it's all contained together. It makes it a lot easier for our budgeting process, and we are going to start sort of working with international organizing committees with known competitions where we know that there will be Canadian athletes, and working in advance with them to say, okay, do you need Canadian officials there? And if we have Canadian officials who are really looking to be able to have international engagement, would you be willing to take on a Canadian official or more than one in order to help you out? So we're going to be incorporating that in. I think this will streamline our processes a little bit and hopefully be able to provide the same sort of developmental pathway that we've been able to establish for our athletes and our coaches out to our officials. So, okay, now for serious, I'm done. Okay, and hearing no questions, certainly if anyone has anything that they want to talk about, feel free to give me a call, send me an email. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to eat some lunch and then send out invites for the next meeting. And if I don't speak to you before, have a fantastic Canada Day.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for the updates.